Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Donut Hole, your place where a couple of guys sit around and pontificate. My name's Paul,
And I'm Jason.
and we're coming at you from our studios here in Nashville. So, Jason, let's go ahead and just dive right into the meat and potatoes of today's show.
Sure.
I guess since let's go ahead and focus on some current events. So Trump was recently in Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
talking with the leader of the DPRK, Kim Jong Un,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody's been kind of giving him a bunch of crap for, even meeting with the guy, which, you know, traditionally hasn't proven to be fruitful to obviously try to deal with them. But
Right.
still, if you never try to deal with them, then nothing's ever going to get done.
Right.
So, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I have a little bit of mixed feelings about it. I know Trump tends to be a little bit of a flatterer, which I don't like that part. However, he was willing to walk away when he didn't, achieve the goals he wanted. I think overall it's a good thing to open up the dialogue. Like you said, if you don't take that first step, you're never going to
Mm.
achieve any kind of diplomatic, I guess, relations with them. Somebody's got to reach out first,
Mm.
and eventually, if we're going to bring North Korea into normal relations with the rest of the world, that first step has to be taken.
Yeah, you're right. I think at the end of the day, I mean, whether it's this regime or the next one that comes up or the one subsequent following, at some point something's got to give.
Yeah.
And you're already starting to see some reforms there within society. I mean, there was a time when just looking at the clothing that people wore was always, drab, like same 5 colors.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're starting to see splashes of colors in people's wardrobes. So obviously standard of living has improved somewhat. And the more people become exposed to things,
Mm-hmm.
change is going to have to happen.
Yeah.
You can't keep it like exactly the same forever. So, you know,
And I've heard the argument that, people say, well, this guy's done, he's executed a lot of people. He's running a gulag state. And all that is true.
mhm.
However, under Obama, we started to take those steps of normalizing relations with Cuba, which there's still a long way to go.
Mhm.
But if you never take those steps, then you're just basically writing those people off. And if we have to inflate the ego of a despotic leader to help the people, even if it's just a little bit, because those people are in such a dire situation, we could swallow our pride a little bit to help those people a little bit.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, if you looked through it historically, every time the United States has engaged in any kind of diplomatic or international relations with a country uh, that has been more of an adversary, it usually works out to our advantage at the end.
Yeah.
The examples of that might be Yugoslavia, Soviet Union, countries like this, mainland China to an extent. Every time we actually, deal with these countries, things start to change there. Change begins to happen.
Well, it's just like in interpersonal relationships. If two people don't like one another and one person believes that everybody's against them,
Mhm.
that's where you get the school shooters and people like that. But
Mhm.
if you engage with them, maybe they might start to think, okay, maybe the world's not against me. Maybe we can start to work things out.
Yeah.
And now, eventually, of course, you don't want to. One family like in North Korea ruling as if they were kings,
Mhm.
but tackling that is way further away than normalizing relations and helping the people of North Korea.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, Trump didn't really give too much. He ended up walking out of the meeting, and I believe even Chuck Schumer said it was a good thing, all said
Yeah.
and done. So,
Yeah.
when one of your biggest rivals is like, okay, we have to give you some credit here. I guess that works out.
Now, I did not like the fact that when asked about Otto Warmbier, Trump kind of just said, well, I don't believe that Kim Jong Un knew about it. He told me he didn't know about it, uh, which may or may not be true. And because what Trump said is true as far as those gulags are tough places. I mean, who knows what could have happened? It could have been the commander of the gulag. It could have been another prisoner that beat this guy to death. We don't know.
Yeah.
But for him to sit there and kind of give Kim Jong Un a personal pass on that did irk me a bit.
Yeah. That was seemingly a bit dodgy, but
Yeah, because he could have just said, hey, what happened there is really terrible, and we're going to handle that the way we need to handle it, and just kind of, I mean, I know that's kind of glossing it over, but he didn't have to give Kim Jong Un a pass of, oh, he didn't know about it, he's a good guy.
yeah.
That was a bit much.
Yeah, I mean, there's stroking somebody's ego, and then there's just that, which
Yeah,
that's pretty crappy.
but overall, it's the same with Nixon and China. I mean, you gotta. Only Trump can go to North Korea, I guess. And hopefully this will lead to down the road I mean, dare we hope the best of reunification of Korea?
Yeah. And kind of play devil's advocate. I mean, if honestly, at the end of the day, if Kim Jong Un was actually smart about this, he would simply say, okay, fine, we're going to quit making nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
We're going to have a nuclear energy program, and we're going to stop ballistic missiles.
Mhm.
But then 5 years later, announce a space program.
Yeah.
You know, if he wanted to basically keep doing the same things,
Right.
that's how he would go about it.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's seemingly thought that through.
Yeah, and I don't think he's thought through what, because he has way more personally to gain by opening up relations and trade to the rest of the world.
Oh, yeah.
The guy could be wealthy beyond imagination.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sure he's in one of those Soviet style wealth. When I believe it was Boris Yeltsin who came to America and went to the supermarket and was amazed and shocked at the variety of foods and the things, because he was, the Soviet president.
Mm-hmm.
I guess for not very long, but and he saw what could be accomplished with the free market system, and even he was astonished. Even he didn't have access to those kinds of things on a day-to-day basis that your average New Yorker did. And I think if Kim Jong-un would recognize that, even if it's from a selfish manner, it would help the people of Korea until he, either died or got out of there, or a coup happened, or what have you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at the end of the day, I think, if you were to go about that, you could start to westernize the economy, doing kind of the same thing that the Chinese did with basically saying, okay, this is as far as communism, quote unquote, take us.
Yeah.
We've got to modernize our economy.
Right.
And then shift it.
Mm-hmm.
And at which point, North Korea would be an economic powerhouse.
Yeah.
So he's making a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
It's kind of, they could come back, if he were to play ball, it could come back to bite him eventually.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for now, for the short and medium term, he would be doing much better.
Yeah. And I'm sure the way he's playing this to his people is trying to gain legitimacy through, hey, I took on the president of the United States, and I'm sure that's what the propaganda is saying in North Korea is look at me, I'm tough, I can go toe to toe with the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, there has to be something in his mind that keeps him coming there, because past leaders would not have done that. So there's obviously, he's thinking there may be an advantage there for him.
Yeah. All right, well, let's keep moving along. So I guess obviously we've got the Michael Cohen testimony going on in the Senate right now. The Senate or House? House.
Yeah.
Which has kind of turned into a kangaroo court.
Yeah, it's I didn't watch the entire thing. I've just read articles, so I don't know the entire contents. But from what I've read, it just seems like a lot of rumors and hearsay, and just it's theatrics. It's political theatrics. Nothing that I've heard is anything that I would think the American people would be concerned about, unless, of course, you just super anti-Trump and you just believe anything because you want to. For example, the guy said, "Oh, I heard Trump say this racist thing." They challenged him. They said, "Do you have any recordings of this?" He said, "No." And funny enough, the guy who was questioning him said, "Well, you seem to have recorded everything else."
Yeah.
But he's a well-known liar and fixer. Yeah. I mean, I just think it's just a bunch of nonsense.
Well, you can't call him a liar. He may have lied, but he's not a liar.
Oh, so he says.
So it is what it is.
But I think it's just trying to set up more reasons for more investigations and just to keep this thing. If Trump wins another term, it's just going to keep going for 8 years.
Yeah, I imagine it would.
Yeah.
And even Cohen has said, I have no proof of any quote unquote Russian collusion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, so the whole purpose of this investigation into Trump was this, and we've not found it.
Mm-hmm.
Still not found it.
Mm-hmm.
Even, getting his attorney or his fixer, because I guess he was an attorney, hence the attorney-client privilege thing doesn't come into effect, which is ridiculous. But his fixer, who does everything, all his dodgy dealings, doesn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
It's pretty much a done deal that this specific aspect didn't happen. I mean, there's plenty of things to go after Trump about, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
You could look into some business dealings. Obviously he has to deal with, labor unions and things like that are kind of mobbed up in New York. So, I mean, I'm sure there's some dodgy stuff that you could get him on something, but it seems that they're trying to go after this Russia collusion thing, and that's never going to pan out for him because clearly it didn't happen.
Well, it's not good when it happens to Trump, and then when it's a Democrat president and they turn it around, it's not going to be good then either.
No.
It's those Soviet tactics of show us the man and we'll show you the crime.
Yeah.
There's so many laws and regulations in America. Anybody, if you put anybody under that much scrutiny, you're going to eventually find something.
Yeah, of course.
No matter how minor. So I just don't like that tactics. I think if you're investigating collusion, you investigate collusion. Now, if you stumble across some major crime that has to be looked into, obviously, but you don't just start sending tentacles out everywhere to find every little thing that a person has done. I think that goes against our history of jurisprudence in this country, and innocent until proven guilty. And I mean, do we waste these resources just investigating? I mean, why don't we investigate the CEOs of companies? Find out what they did. Why don't we just start investigating everybody? I've been reading Solzhenitsyn lately of the Gulag Archipelago. We could just start throwing everybody in prison.
Yeah, there we go. Let's do that.
But it's just ridiculous. And honestly, it was ridiculous when it happened to Clinton too with the Whitewater thing.
Mm-hmm.
It went on too long. If a couple years go by, you don't find anything. Let's close up the investigation, move on with our lives.
Yeah. So there's that. Anyway, guys, we're gonna take a quick break. We'll get back to you guys shortly.
Hi, I would like to take a minute to tell you a bit about HeroSong. HeroSong is a 501c3 non-for-profit organization set up to record the music of veterans, active duty, and first responders who also have musical ambitions. Music is great for the soul, and that's what makes us unique and ever so wonderful. Please check them out and consider giving them your support. Again, that's at herosong.org. Thanks.
Alrighty, we're back from the break. So last segment we were talking about, we left off talking about the Cohen testimony. Let's go to everybody's favorite liberal bartender, AOC.
Yeah. I enjoyed. There's several articles. Oh, she really went after Cohen to get those tax Trump records. I'm not sure. Did you see that segment?
No, I don't think I did. I think I messed up.
I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, but basically it was she asked Cohen, well, have you personally seen him do anything basically with his taxes that would be fraudulent and whatnot? And Cohen says, no, I've not seen any of that evidence. I wouldn't know because I haven't been privy to that information.
Yeah. And
then she proceeds to say, well, if we subpoenaed his tax returns, would that make us more privy to that information? And he says, yes. And everybody's clapping. Oh, yes. And that's like me saying, well, Paul, have you sold any drugs? You say no. I say, well, if we asked the people you sold drugs to, would we know about you selling drugs? I mean, it's just a foolish, it's just, of course you would know more. I mean, it's just an excuse to subpoena the tax records.
Yeah.
And you're going to take, Michael Cohen said yes, therefore we should subpoena them.
Oh, of course, because, I mean, Michael Cohen is the end-all be-all on Trump, right?
Yeah. So that was just a silly line of questioning, and so many, news sites just praising her for that.
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while she does something that's halfway, like a glint of thought. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, you're thinking that's not bad. And then, back to crazy town. So, yeah, I really don't know what the deal is with her and why she's such the media darling these days. The only thing I can think of is maybe they're grooming her to be VP or something.
I don't know. I know it makes a lot of the old school Democrats look more moderate.
Mm-hmm.
Makes them look a lot more sane. Because if you were thinking it was simply along the lines of, your minority victories, your intersectional thought, well, you've got the young Muslim ladies, you've got people of color that are, more intersectional than she is. She's a straight woman. She's, not Muslim, So you'd think if they were going that intersectional route, they would go with the Muslim women more, but they seem to have focused on her.
Well, I think the reason they focused on her is, at the end of the day, I don't really think like the Muslim candidate or the Muslim new congresswoman who is was she from like Somalia?
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly. I don't think she's going to have as good of star appeal. Because I mean, lately it seems that they're focusing, especially Democrat Party. I mean, if you look at like the last candidate they ran for president, not obviously not Hillary. Prior to that, Barack Obama. You know, you had a handsome guy,
Hmm.
you know, who seemingly well spoken, and you know the people. I mean, people like that. So you have an attractive candidate who seemingly has his head on
Mhm.
straight, and people are going to go for that.
Hmm.
Now, granted, you could pick apart his arguments on
Right.
things. That's doable, you know. But on the surface, it looks good.
Oh,
And on the
yeah.
surface, Cortez looks good.
Right.
You know, she, you know, attractive lady. You know, has this, you know, rags to riches story, which it is just that, a story, because
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
her
a-
father was a pretty well established architect, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
he
right?
was a partner in an architectural firm.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not like she was full on rags to riches, but
Right.
you know, she
Right.
was working as a bartender, kind of a regular, normal
Mhm.
job. You know, kind of, you know, middle America kind of thing, and then has now been elated to this new status of
Mhm.
you know being a new congresswoman, and good for her. You know that she's managed to do that. Um, but it seems almost that they're picking their candidates not only on substance but on physical appearance, and because it seems that a lot of Americans will vote on that kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely. You know, that was a big reason that Kennedy was considered to have won the debate against Nixon.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you listen to that debate audio only, which is the only way I've ever heard it, you would say it's kind of a draw.
Yeah.
But so many Americans thought Kennedy won because he's so handsome and so charismatic.
Yeah, and it was the whole thing, because back then there was two different. It was broadcast two different ways. You had people that were watching it on television, people that were listening to it on
Mhm.
radio. People on radio were like, draw maybe Nixon,
Right.
and then everybody else that watched on television, because it was, I believe, the first debate that was televised.
Yes, it was first presidential debate.
Yeah, they said, oh, Kennedy won it hands down, because
Mhm.
you know Nixon's kind of a little bit older. He's sweating like crazy up there.
Yeah.
Because of the stage lights. Because back then they had to have these huge,
Right, the
massive,
metal halide.
yeah. So massive lights that are just making you sweat on stage anyway. You know, I guess Kennedy just kind of kept his cool with it, and Nixon's over here sweating bullets. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, we've seen that go back as far as then, as far as you know, the attractive,
Yeah.
handsome, you know, well-spoken candidate versus the
And that's really it's. I would say the Hillary Trump was kind of the first race we've had in a long time where none of that really applied, because neither candidate was attractive.
No.
Neither candidate was terribly charismatic.
Mm-mm.
They were both kind of rough, which you know kind of goes to show you why the voter turnout was low, and it was a very contentious election.
Mhm.
So that was curious to see that, because like you said, Barack Obama before that was very charismatic.
Mhm.
Even if you don't agree with his policies, seemed like the kind of guy you just want to hang out with.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the Republicans putting up people like Mitt Romney, who, you know, just looks like a squeaky clean Boy Scout. And
Mhm.
But this last election, it was just it was two very unattractive.
Yeah, that was the first time they ran with that, and obviously it didn't work well for the DNC with that.
Yeah.
They you know forced Hillary into the position,
Hmm.
and that didn't work out for them.
Right.
At the end of the day, they forced an ugly candidate who nobody likes, and had a little bit of star appeal because of her husband.
Hmm.
Because people seemingly, you know, you like him or not, they seemingly were more favorable of Bill Clinton than
Yeah.
other presidents in the
Right.
past.
Right.
So looking at it like that, you know, I think they're moving towards the attractive candidate, because that seems to be a good strategy for them, and it's panned out in the past every single time they've tried it.
But
Just
it also makes me wonder who they're going to put up against Trump in 2020, because they don't have a lot of options.
Yeah.
I know that, you know, Kamala Harris, but I think she's a little too radical for the swing voters in the country, and we still need the swing voters to win a presidential election. I mean, you look at Ohio and Florida, and yeah, I mean, you need those voters to win an election. And
Yeah, even Michigan went red this last go around.
she's very radical. Bernie Sanders is just old crazy Bernie. There's going to be a lot of young people who support him, but I don't know if you know. I talked to a friend of mine when Bernie was running against Hillary,
Mm-hmm.
and I asked her, and she's a diehard Democrat,
Mm-hmm.
and I asked her, I said, "Are you going to vote for Bernie Sanders?" She said, "God, no, he's a socialist." So you know, there's that, and because this lady is a, you know, professional,
Mhm.
and she understands capitalism and the free market, and even though she's a Democrat, she's not a socialist.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, you know, that's a little up in the air too. I know a lot of people are talking about Joe Biden, but I mean, we're supposed to be getting young, fresh faces, all they're talking about, but our presidential candidates have been old as dirt here lately.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was talking about Reagan and how old he was, but you got Trump, you got Hillary, now Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these people are Bernie Sanders. They're much older than Reagan was when he ran the first time.
Yeah, and everybody was making jokes that Reagan's going to die in office, so.
And I think a lot of it is the younger candidates, which right now I guess we're just looking at the Democrats because we have a Republican president.
Mm-hmm.
They're just too radical to be palatable to most of the American public. I mean, Kamala Harris just talked about legalizing prostitution recently. Most of your swing voters that live suburban moms are not going to like to hear that.
Mm-hmm. And while that would probably actually be the better option, all given said and done, as far as eliminating human trafficking and things like that.
Sure, it's actually a libertarian position. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of shocking coming from the left, really. When the left always wants bigger government to solve problems, that's
Yeah.
one of less government.
Well, it is and it's not. It would probably be more government at the end of the day because there would be a new regulatory board that oversees,
Sure,
that particular industry.
but just for the general, you got to think of your Ohio suburban,
Mm-hmm.
folks. That's very unpalatable, and those are the people who win elections.
Yeah,
because we all know how California and New York are going to go. We all know how Tennessee and Alabama are going to go. It's Florida's and Ohio and those states matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the end of the day, that's where your vote counts, I suppose,
Mm-hmm.
more than anything else. Because at the end of the day, at least for now, Tennessee's going red and California's going blue.
Yeah.
So there is that.
So I don't know how it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, no matter what happens coming up, it'll be interesting. But I think actually when we're going to bring up AOC, we were actually initially going to talk about how she's now on the oversight committee. I don't think we actually mentioned that.
Yes.
So she, brand new, fresh face, and she's already found herself in a pretty substantial position.
Yeah. Yeah. Very odd. Very odd to say the least.
So,
but it's hard to tell because the Democrats, much like Republicans, are very fractured right now. When you hear Nancy Pelosi say stuff like "I haven't read the Green New Deal," and Dianne Feinstein saying we can't afford it, and Chuck Schumer, because you heard that Turtle Man Mitch McConnell wanted to get a vote on it just to get everybody on record.
Yeah,
and Chuck Schumer didn't want to vote on it, and he's making up, of course, mental gymnastics.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's simply because he doesn't want his people in his party on record to go against it or for it.
Mm-hmm.
So they're very fractured right now. They're trying to figure that out.
Actually, AOC's only, 30 right now, isn't she? Or 32?
29,
She's
maybe?
29?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, she couldn't even be president or vice president, could she?
No.
So maybe that's just going to be kind of a setting her into
Mm-hmm.
higher positions of power before they run her. Because I don't think they can run her this go
Well,
around.
and her youth and experience is showing on some certain comments that she made that are very almost communist sounding.
Mm-hmm.
She's talking about how we're in charge. She said, "I'm the boss." You don't say that when you're a representative of the American people. The American people are the boss.
Yeah.
You're not the boss. And she said, till people have better ideas and all this, we're the boss. I'm, things like that. And we're in charge. That's not a good look. And the American people don't like that.
No. I think even the people that support her don't like that.
No, it's us who are in charge, not
Mm-hmm.
It's and I even catch myself doing it. Don't say they're not our leaders; they're our representatives.
Exactly.
We should be leading them, not the other way around.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's keep moving forward. I guess let's talk a bit since we were talking about show trials and Mickey Mouse courts. So let's go move into another kangaroo court with the whole Robert Kraft thing in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
So as you brought out, the actual investigation is still ongoing with that, and the NFL's, I guess, going ahead and penalize him. Correct?
Yeah, I don't think they've made any hard and fast decisions yet. But the NFL, which has lost so many, public relations points in the last few years, between whether you agree with it or not, the player protests, the domestic violence scandals, it's just not doing well in the public image right now. But I will go against, the popular opinion is, well, you got to punish these people, and the NFL wants to punish these people to make the image look better. But I don't like companies punishing people for something they haven't been found guilty of in a court of law yet. I think that, especially when they're finding them to the tune of $500,000. And I know Robert Kraft's a billionaire, and $500,000 is nothing to him.
Mm-hmm.
But even still, I find that oppressive. I think we should wait and see what the courts say first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because at the end of the day, I mean, if you're starting to see this already come out, the whole court of public opinion, and then everybody trying to sanction people prior to any legal proceedings going forward. And that's usually not a good thing because, the whole notion of innocence till proven guilty is starting to disappear in the legal system here in the United States, even if not in the technical legal system in society as it is. So that's not a good look. It's not good for society moving forward. Because we're just going to get to a point where you make an accusation against somebody, and that's all that matters, true or not. And that's not good.
Yeah, and I mean, you get to doxing and things like this, and what people, they tend to say, oh, well, Robert Kraft's a billionaire. Who cares? Let him pay his $500,000. But the point is, it's that old saying, they came for so and so, but I didn't say anything because I wasn't, so and so. And it will trickle down. I saw on social media the other day a friend of mine who no longer lives in the state had said, I don't normally do this on social media, but they basically reposted a doxing of a person simply because this person had two dogs in a kennel on a bumper carrier. The bumper carriers that go in the ball hitch area.
Yeah.
And first of all, I'm like, well, what's the difference between that? And I mean, they had it strapped down and in the back of a pickup truck, number one. And number two, saying, oh, I don't normally want to dock somebody, but because two dogs are in a bumper, I'm going to put this man's life. Because you never know. This man could get death threats. Could be the wrong person. And I find that just disturbing that that's taking over in society.
Yeah.
And this friend of mine that did it's not a bad person. They don't want somebody to be hurt, but, the emotions of two dogs in a picture seem to overrun. It's strange. And we seem to be applying that to everything now.
Yeah, it's kind of where things are moving.
Yeah.
It's getting interesting.
Yeah, whereas it's almost that the legal is secondary to the public opinion.
Yeah. Speaking of public opinion, it seems that some of the kind of centrist left, some of the political commentators in the public sphere, like Dave Rubin, who would normally be considered center left, are now being slapped on the label of conservative, whether they are or not.
I think it's almost, if you're anti-PC, you're going to be labeled as conservative.
I think it's more than that. I think now it's just if you do not toe every single aspect of the party line, if you will. If you are not 100% on with the PC, like if you deviate on any one issue and you do not buy it lock, stock, and barrel, you're the enemy.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is now.
Well, Dave Rubin's a perfect example because he's a gay guy that's married. He's pro-choice. Been what he claims himself as a classical liberal his whole life. He was on the Young Turks is how he got his start. And now people think he's a conservative simply because he's for free speech and free exchange of ideas. And a lot of, like you said, he doesn't toe every single little line of their agenda, so he's on the outs with them. Once again, reminding me of reading Solzhenitsyn. It's, if you slip up one little ideological thing, you're in the gulag. You're out.
Yeah.
And it's not a gulag in America. It's a public, once again, comes back to the public opinion.
Yeah, at the moment. But, I mean, what's to save it, moving forward? In the last episode, we talked about, how people on some college campuses are totally okay with throwing Trump supporters into a gulag. So, all right.
Well, and speaking of college campuses, some of these same people in the intellectual dark web that are considered, Eric and Brett Weinstein. I can't remember which one, the brothers. One of them was the guy in the Evergreen College where they had the no whites on campus day.
Yeah.
Which is about as racist as you can get. Singling one single race out. And he refused to leave the campus. He was a professor. Well, he ended up getting fired over it. And he's a very left-leaning guy, and he's on the outs with the left himself. And it's just shocking.
Well, he wasn't even just 100% quote-unquote white, if you will. I believe he was Jewish, too.
He's Jewish, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, technically...
But he's Eastern European descent.
Yeah,
so,
Ashkenazi Jew, so, you're white enough.
Skin,
so, to hell with you, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah. So you're ending up, which in the long run is going to obviously backfire on them. You're excluding anyone who has even the slightest difference of opinion, like you'd said. It's going to backfire on you. You're going to lose people. You're going to lose supporters.
I don't know. I'm almost of the mindset I think things are just going to get kind of crazy and people are just going to start going along with it.
Well, I kind of do see that.
I mean, you saw that within the last election. All the polls would saying, "Oh, Trump's way behind. Trump's way behind," and then boom, he wins. People are going to be one way in public, another way in private. That's just how it's going to be.
Well, there's a lot of people I know that live in this town that if you talk to them privately, they seem to be more conservative than what they are publicly. Publicly they're all for the intersectional, extreme left agenda, free everything. But they run businesses, they do things. You talk to them in private, they don't want higher taxes. They understand these things, but in public, you would think that they're just, the AOC type. So you're right. And they may be behaving differently at the ballot box and not telling anyone.
Yeah, I think that's something we're starting to see a bit of as well. So that means that most of these polls that are coming out are going to be pretty unreliable. So there is that. Well, we're going to take another quick break, and we'll get back to you guys shortly.
Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the content. If you are, make sure to press that like and subscribe button right down there. And if there's any material and stuff you would like to see us cover, we're more than happy to do that for you as well. Hope to have some new content coming out for our Patreon subscribers. Those of you that are, in the mood to do that. We also have one of those. Should be pretty easy to find us, the Donut Hole Show. And, yeah.
Yeah, and once we get some more subscribers, we'll probably start a merch store, do some mugs, some hats, things like that. We're just now starting out. Hopefully this episode got our audio quality fixed and continue to move forward for you guys and offer more and more every week.
Yep. So, thanks again, guys.
Alrighty, guys, we're back from the break. So let's keep going with some of the topics of the day. So I believe you brought this up. UPS or it was UPS.
I believe
right?
so.
Yeah, UPS has stopped shipments in some of Europe's no-go zones and some of the, new migrant enclaves within the countries like Sweden and what have you, right?
Right.
So,
and I believe it was just due to theft, harassment of the drivers. And they just basically didn't feel safe having the drivers in these areas.
So who's handling deliveries for that now? Are they handing it off to the post office? Or
I'm not sure. I mean, and I'm sure there's other private companies who are. I mean, there's DHL, there's FedEx. But that's at least one company that's just saying, no, we're not going to do it.
Okay.
It's just too dangerous.
Gotcha. That's interesting.
Yeah. Which it's just politically correct policing. I've seen documentaries where they try to go to Sweden and, of course, Sweden being a free democratic country, most places you walk around with a camera, nobody has a problem with it. You go to one of these enclaves, people start harassing you for filming and the police won't do anything. As a matter of fact, the police tell you to stop filming in this area. So that's not a good turn of events for Western society.
No, it's really not, but that's just where things are moving, it seems.
Yeah. Also read an article we were discussing earlier about a neighborhood in Atlanta where the residents are upset because they've decided to do some politically correct policing and stop enforcing minor crime violations. Minor, say somebody smashes your mailbox, whatnot. The police just aren't going to follow up on it. They're just going to ignore it.
So, I mean, are the residents going to do anything about it, or are they going to try to hire a private security contractor to come in and take care of it?
The article didn't really mention what the conclusion of it is, but I believe like you see in a lot of these places, it's they look at the numbers afterwards and they say, well, how do we reduce this? Well, you stop enforcing the law, and it looks like, hey, we've got less arrests. It looks like things are improving. Pretty bad state of affairs.
Well, I'm sure that'll help, their budget because now they're, such a exemplary law enforcement agency that has such low crime statistics in their area.
Yes. Once again, very communist way of thinking. We have full employment. Just because you put somebody digging a ditch where a ditch doesn't need to be doesn't mean you have full employment.
Or people drop off the unemployment rolls because it ran out or there's just no jobs to be had, so they said screw it. So yeah, same thing.
And we're having a problem here in Nashville with the the Civilian Oversight Committee for the police. The Republicans are trying to strip them of subpoena power which I don't believe they should have subpoena power if they're not an actual court. These are just random citizens. Now, citizens are absolutely entitled to know the facts and things like that, but should they be acting as a legal court? I say no, they shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, it does start to get kind of dicey in that situation. I mean, obviously, you want to have some accountability within the police departments. Relying it entirely on them to self-report and behave themselves is sometimes not going to happen.
Sure.
And that's obvious. I mean, we've seen police cover up some things, and that shouldn't be the case. But on the flip side, being able to fully on subpoena everything, that seems a bit much. However, the only time I think that might be useful would be, say, if there was an instance and they said, well, let's see the body cam footage. And the police department's like, oh, we don't have to give that to you.
Sure. And that's very shady. But I don't think there necessarily has to be a civilian oversight board to accomplish that. Honestly, I believe that all that should be a matter of public record.
Yeah, I think it should be as well. If there's an incident or an incident of some sort and it's being brought into question, I think that, all that type of material like body cam footage and what have you should be made, available. But sometimes it's not.
Right.
And I think that's the only instance in where a subpoena from either, honestly, it should be handled by a regular court anyway. And so they should be able to subpoena the records.
Right.
And then it'd be made public.
Yeah.
But.
And we already did have a, system of community oversight. It's called a jury. So, I could even understand saying, hey, instead of, maybe handling these things internally, we need to go to court with it with a jury. I can understand that. But basically putting up a board without a judge, without a jury, I just don't like the idea of that.
Yeah, it does start to get into kind of that court of public opinion and kind of deal over facts.
Yes.
And then you have this unelected, usually, group of people that just, decide things. That's usually not good.
Yeah, and you can already see that. I mean, that's how our bureaucracies have gotten out of control. They're unelected folks that are just employees of the federal government. Honestly, it's very unconstitutional. They're making laws. They call them regulations, but the effect is that of a law. If you break a regulation, you may end up in jail. So what's the difference between that and the law? And once again, I think this gets back to the subject we talked about on an earlier podcast of Congress not fulfilling their responsibilities, because they should be the ones making those regulations, making those laws, not leaving it up to, unelected bureaucrats.
Yeah, and then of course you have things like with the ATF going in and changing entire existing laws and rewriting them.
Yeah.
That was recently something that happened. Say recently, it was several months ago at this point with the whole bump stock thing. Bump stock's kind of a silly, goofy, device to begin with. But at the end of the day, they reworded an existing law to now include that. When the ATF had already come out and said, well, this technically does not meet the definition of a machine gun because it's not. But then, Trump says, hey, make it so, and they did. And that's pretty dicey. When you can go in, take an existing law, modify it without any, legal body doing so, it's just, an enforcement agency changing the law.
Yeah.
On the spot. And thusly making anybody in possession of this device, which was deemed okay beforehand, now a felon for having it. And then, moreover, no way to be able to keep it if they wanted to. So now they have to surrender their property, which they paid for, and it was totally legal to have. Now they have to surrender their property or risk being a felon with no compensation, no nothing.
Yeah.
Just like, oh, this is now illegal. You can't have it.
Yeah.
At least with, regular machine guns prior, to 1986, 1986 rolls around and says, hey, register your machine guns if you want to keep them. You could do that. Same thing in 64 and then in 32 when the law was the first law on the books about that was initially passed. So, yeah, the fact that they can just go in and change laws now without, it actually going through Congress or any type of legislative body, it's just, oh, we're changing the law, literally, just line strike, change it. That's not good. And that's kind of where we're at now. We are now officially in a soft tyranny.
Yeah. You saw Barack Obama doing a lot of executive orders. Trump's doing a lot of executive orders. And really all it boils down to is that Congress is so impotent right now. They're afraid to do anything that may piss off their constituency just a tiny bit.
Mm.
So they just basically do nothing.
Except grandstand.
Oh, they'll grandstand, or they'll pass some obvious law like, oh, we passed something that everybody can agree on.
Yeah.
Like, human trafficking is bad. We pass, oh, well, of course, they're all patting each other on the back. Oh, you really did something there. But anything else, it just seems, the agencies and, well, the Supreme Court, gay marriage, for example, which everybody gives a lot of the Democrats credit for. Well, the Democrats didn't have the moral courage to stand up and make gay marriage legal when they had the opportunity to.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't. They just waited, they just did nothing and let the Supreme Court decide that. And that's where it started, was these Supreme Court decisions. And now it's going into unelected bureaucrats, and now the president is acting like a king. It's just getting out of hand rather quickly.
Yeah, so this is also part of the reason I just want to get the hell out of here. At the end of the day, I mean, I don't see the United States continuing to exist in any kind of free and, any kind of resemblance of a republic for too much longer.
Mm-hmm.
So personally, I want to get the hell out while I still can.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why at some point in the future, this podcast will be somewhat broadcast from outside the U.S.
Yeah.
Don't know about it on your end, but I know on my end it sure as hell will be.
Yeah.
So right now it's just, biding time, stacking paper, and trying to get, geared up to do so.
Well, Western civilization is definitely in a decline, and a lot of it is, economically driven, which, people say, they have all these crazy conspiracy theories about the immigrants in Europe, but a lot of it boils down to large companies need more labor, populations are stagnating, and regardless of what political party you belong to or what side you think you're on, they're all for big business.
Mm-hmm.
I love that when I hear these people say, oh, the Republicans are big business, like the Democrats aren't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, but it's tearing down everything else. All it is you got to keep this engine going at any cost.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a good idea. Constant growth model is not going to work for our economy in the future. If we're having to import people from overseas in mass numbers just to keep the economy moving forward, we have a problem with the economy. Because eventually the population in the world can only grow so much.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with the stock market. You hear these things like Walmart stock dropped even though they made record profits because they didn't grow as much as was expected. And everything's not based upon how well they do, it's how much they grow.
Mm-hmm.
You see it with pressures from managers and companies. How much did you grow? Well, you can't maintain that forever.
No, and growth isn't the same as profits. Profits should be where it's driven. It's like, how much money did you make?
Right.
Growing 4% or making, $4 million, what's better? Making $4 million.
Yeah.
Because if you only made, 500,000 and you grew 4% as opposed to, or 2%, so to correlate it, let's say you grow 2% and make $4 million, or you grow 4% and make $500,000. Which one's better? Well, I think growing 2% and making $4 million is a hell of a lot better than growing 4% and not making, a hell
I
of
agree,
beans.
but your stock with the 4% growth would be bigger.
Which is insane.
Yeah, and that's what our whole Western economy is based off now. It's just this continual growth. Well, that can only... I was talking to a friend of mine who's a manager at a restaurant, and he's the store manager, and all their bonuses are based off growth. And like he said, it's useless. Said maybe I grow 1 year, maybe the next year I shrink. It's not based upon keeping his costs in order, but that's becoming the whole model for the whole economy, and that's just unsustainable.
Yeah. So, let's move forward, I guess. Let's get into some little pontificating and speculation of where we think the future's moving. I'm almost to the mindset where I don't think that the idea of a representative government or republic is going to even last anywhere in the world coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I'm probably going to flee the United States and try to, have something, go to another country that is ranked higher or equally high currently on the Global Freedom Index. At the end of the day, I don't think it's going to last forever. I think we're reaching a point now where society is going to just totally and radically change across the globe, where freedoms and individual liberties are going to be stripped, and we're all going to be basically subjects of this new world, this brave new world we're entering into. And now this keeps me up awake at night sometimes, is trying to figure out how best to fit within that world and not only survive, because we all have to survive it,
Sure.
but how to thrive in it.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, that's kind of a deep question, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's hard to see which direction things are going. They're definitely going, like you said, a representative government is going by the wayside. But I think some places are going to go more towards direct democracy, which is just as tyrannical, because that's the tyranny of the masses.
Yeah.
Direct democracy is like high school when all the jocks vote that the nerds are stupid and beat them up. It's kind of the same thing. So direct democracy is, and I don't like that term being used all the time. Democracy.
Yeah.
Direct democracy is a terrible thing. It's mob rule, simple. Yeah. And so I think you're going to see some Western countries go that direction, and they're going to use, and of course with the media, they're going to use that to manipulate the direct democracy. And then I think you're going to see other places go the opposite direction of authoritarian rule. But either way, the result is just as bad.
It's basically the same thing either way you slice it.
Yes.
Because, I mean, it's not that hard to control the masses into believing an idea.
Right.
The same idea that would be passed down from king on high. So whether it's, Xi Jinping making a directive or all the yellow vesters telling people what to do, it's going to be the same result. Because the yellow vesters have been told this is why you should protest and this, that, and the other. And then they do it. Versus Xi Jinping says, this is what we do. And it's kind of the same thing at the end of the day.
Well, and I think a lot of this is going to be driven by too much information. Because people don't know what to believe. And so they end up believing the quote-unquote most trusted sources.
Or whatever they want to believe.
Or, a lot of times, yeah. You got anywhere from the guy who thinks the New York Times is gospel to the guy who thinks Alex Jones is gospel. And neither one of those is true. You have to always, you have to read multiple sources. You have to suss out the truth yourself, which I think has always been the case. But we never had a 24-hour news cycle until, the 1980s?
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's a very new thing. So, normal people weren't engaged in it as much. And now it's causing all this outrage and uproar. And people don't know how to pick through the information and find what they need to find. Yeah.
So wait, you're actually telling me that Alex Jones isn't right and that the frog isn't gay?
Frog's not gay.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I had to.
But New York Times isn't right either. Well, actually, the disturbing thing about actually mainstream media that's more disturbing than people like Alex Jones, because Alex Jones is pretty obvious what he is.
Yeah.
Most people.
Yeah, he's more of a shock conspiracy theory
unless
guy.
You're a little off in the head, you know what Alex Jones is.
He'll hit on a couple of things that, make sense, but most of it's just shock jock, fun, crazy conspiracy goof.
Right.
Yeah.
But you read these papers like the New York Times, Washington Post. The headlines are totally misleading, and the first paragraph skews in a certain way. Now, if you read the entire story, it's generally pretty true, and they do mention the facts. But most people don't do that, and they know that. So that's how they manipulate it, and that's also how they can say, well, we did say the truth. Yeah, in paragraph, 23 on the second page. Most people don't read that far. They read the first paragraph, tells them what they need to know, at least so they think, and they move on. Because it will shock you to read some of these New York Times articles that are very anti-Trump in the first two paragraphs, and you read further, and they're actually saying some of the things that Trump did right later on, but nobody ever gets that far. And to me, that's scarier than your Alex Jones.
Yeah, because it's an information overload, and the first information presented is one thing, and then later on the facts come out, and then at the summary, of course, it's going to be back to the top. Because some people will do that. They'll read the first paragraph and the last paragraph and be like, okay, I'm done with it.
Yeah.
And all the meat in the middle, which is normally, traditionally would have been inconsequential, because you could have got it from the first paragraph and the last paragraph. That's actually where all the truth of the matter is, and the rest of it's all opinion and fluff.
Or when they issue retractions. They'll issue a retraction buried in another article, that's about the same subject in the 15th paragraph. And that's just the way they've started doing things to skew things in their direction.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's not what the media tells you, it's what they don't.
Yeah.
Which seems to be the biggest problem. Because, sometimes they'll also just omit things.
Yeah.
Because it's very convenient to be like, oh, here's what happened, and then omit half of it. and it's going to lead an article one way or another.
Mhm.
So yeah, I see that happening. And like you said, it is really hard to kind of predict exactly where things are going. I think we're going to see a lot more social justice-ness, if I coin that as a word, I guess.
I can't stand any more social justice.
Nah, but I think they're gonna push that further, and we're gonna see things go really goofy, like just bizarrely goofy here pretty soon. Um, I think the pendulum's gonna swing further that way before it swings back.
Yeah, which is terribly frightening, and this whole grievance culture. To use a biblical quote, and eye for an eye, everybody is a blind man, and that's kind of the way it is, and it's supremely dividing. It used to be, the kind of the political issues may have been divided on racial issues a bit, and then they kind of wanted to throw the sexuality in there, and then they expanded that to be, transsexuals, and then now they're starting to just expand it to every little aspect of everything. Is separates people, and this is who you are, and that's. I would think people would be offended by that, but they seem to love it. They seem to love being defined by their immutable characteristics.
Yeah. Yeah, because at the end of the day, it seems that they're also placing everybody in these individual pigeonhole categories, and they are making them smaller and smaller. But what I think the left has done, and somewhat brilliantly to a point, I would say, is they're making it with the whole intersectionality of it. It's like, oh, all you little groups are oppressed, and we represent all you little groups, so that you have power. Versus the big bad man who's doesn't have a group. It's just them, the bad guys. It's easier to do it that way.
And I feel bad for the children that are believing this, because when you have a child that looks in the mirror and they don't think, I'm a guy who likes baseball and I like this and that. That's not the way they think. When they look at themselves in the mirror because they've been told this, they think, I'm black, I'm gay. That's the first thing they think, which is not good. You're focusing on the things that separate you from your neighbor. Well, I'm a man, she's a woman. I'm gay, he's straight. That's no way to move us forward. Nobody's ever going to come to a consensus about how we need to move into the future when all you can focus on is what separates you. I think we need to focus on what brings us together.
Yeah, that'd be nice, but I don't think that's where we're going to go. We're going to be seeing moving forward. I think things are going to get really divisive, and things are just going to get really strange.
And the ironic part is we just, in the last decade, achieved equal rights for everyone. And now that we've achieved equal rights for everyone, everybody's splitting into splinter groups and screaming about how they don't have equal rights.
And how they want to have, their own little spaces for themselves.
Because I think gay marriage was kind of that last of like, okay, now everybody truly has equal rights. You can argue socially, whatever, but codified into law, nobody has less rights than another. And we finally achieved that as a society, and yet everybody now thinks we are more oppressed than ever for some reason.
Yeah, because if you look back to like the 1960s, obviously there was real oppression.
Oh yeah, certainly.
When prior times in human history, before the 1920s, women were oppressed. So to say things are worse now than they were then, that's a fallacy and just very disingenuous as a whole.
Well, and it really depresses me because we've come so far in the last 20 years as a world. Forget about Western civilization, Eastern civilization. We're on the verge of eliminating hunger altogether. The only reason hunger exists is because of supply problems, war. There's enough food in the world. There used to not be enough food. There's enough food now. We just have to, get the food to the people, obviously, but for the first time. And you don't have famines. You don't hear about famines in Africa anymore. In the 80s, you heard about them all the time because there's enough food aid. All these things that are great that have happened in the world, life expectancies are skyrocketing. They're going down slightly in the West, but everywhere else they're skyrocketing. But yet we have a whole generation of kids that think things are just terrible and they're the worst they've ever been. That's what disturbs me, is that we've reached a pinnacle and it seems like we're just falling off the cliff.
Yeah. Which is why I'd really like to find a little place to get like-minded people together and create an enclave of people that aren't absolutely daft.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think that's...
And aren't completely obsessed with their first world problems.
Yeah.
That's a big thing that I don't like listening to people's first world problems.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, getting a place, a designated place, ideally that's warm, because I don't like cold weather, but I might have to suffer if can't find anything else. But a place where we can have good business regulations, decent, civil liberties, representative government, and really focus on creating a better future for the world. I'd like to find a place. So if anybody's out there, in position of power in a government somewhere that's listening to this podcast, doubtful, but if you are, make sure to reach out to us, because this is something that needs to happen. And I don't think the United States is going to be that place much longer.
No, we're devolving into just, and it's a great tool for the politicians, because when everybody's fighting each other about stupid issues that don't even matter, we're not looking at the bigger picture things.
No.
So it's easy for them, They just, hey, great, keep them bickering. Keep them bickering with each other so they don't look at us. And I think that's a lot of the reason they do that.
Oh, that's probably most of the reason, because 90% of the issues that are that anybody talks about these days could be very easily solved. I mean, just name one. We could talk about it and figure it out here in like 5 minutes.
And a lot of them are just false. Once again, like the Supreme Court thing, like a friend of mine was so worried about them overturning Roe versus Wade. I'm like, I don't believe that's going to happen. And nobody's mentioned it. Nobody's brought up, oh yeah, I mean, of course, activists have and whatnot, but nobody in the political realm has even mentioned that.
Or even if they did overturn Roe v. Wade, it's saying the notion that before Roe v. Wade, abortions didn't exist in the United States. That's not true either.
Actually, in some places, they were less restricted than they are today.
Yeah. Like New York City is a good example of that. Up until very recently, I believe, it was actually more restrictive now than it was prior to Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade was actually, before that, it was actually less restrictive.
Right.
So.
Right. It wasn't one of those things that legalized it like people think. Once again, this comes to where people aren't educated on the issues. It was just simply left up to the states. And granted, it was a different time. Most states did not allow it, but some states did. Some states did, no matter what, on request. So it wasn't like it wasn't possible.
You just might have to take a Greyhound bus.
Yeah.
And I don't think any states had it in their codified in the law where if you went out of state to do it, you would face criminal penalties.
No, not back then. No. So it was really more of a compelling thing than it was legalizing it, because it wasn't illegal before.
No.
And I believe the same was true for gay marriage. I believe it was not illegal for a state to recognize gay marriage, because I know Vermont did. New York had civil unions, and I did not see the federal government stepping in there and saying no.
Yeah.
So I think once again it was more of a compelling thing, which gay marriage you can see, because that could be construed as a right. Because I've heard the argument, well, they always had the right to marry a woman if they wanted to. Well, obviously, if they're gay, they don't want to.
Yeah.
But that's a little different, because that is treating one group differently from another. Whereas the abortion thing is not, and it's way overblown. All this stuff is way overblown. And I think it's just lack of education.
Yeah. At the end of the day, people just don't know their head from their ass.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to have to beep that. Otherwise, we're going to get demonetized.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to swear, I guess. That's a new YouTube policy.
Is it?
Yeah, you can't swear in your videos, otherwise you might get demonetized.
I don't think ass is swearing.
Is it? No. Okay.
No, my parents were pretty strict growing up, and I think I could get away with saying that every once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
I don't think we're exactly monetized at the moment yet anyway.
No. I think, although they did, I think they completely demonetized PewDiePie for good.
They definitely demonetized Alex Jones. And his gay frogs.
But, Alex Jones does not have any problem making money. I will say that for him.
Yeah.
Between all his supplements and whatever else he does.
He's a virile man.
Speaking of which, Joe Rogan recently had him on.
Yeah.
And gotten a lot of trouble for it, or not trouble, but just blowback from people.
Yeah, a lot of flack.
Which is kind of funny, because anybody who's listened to Joe Rogan enough knows that him and Alex Jones are friends. And, Joe Rogan has said, I don't believe everything he says, but he's a good guy. I like him. And see, that's how far we've went in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Because people listen to Joe Rogan because he does things like that, because he doesn't care. He's an independent guy that can do what he wants, and to not cuss. Joe Rogan has always said, there's no reason to have FU money if you don't say FU, and then you got a lot of this base angry because Alex Jones is on. It's once again, it's just people losing their minds over nothing. Somebody brought up the other day Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley. And there's like the reason there's no William F. Buckley is because there's no Gore Vidal. Because at least Gore Vidal was able to go up there and debate him and was willing to. Well, nowadays, say somebody, I don't know who you could compare to William F. Buckley, but Thomas Sowell. I think he's of a stature you could compare him.
Yeah.
Who from the left is going to debate Thomas Sowell and do it openly? Nobody would.
Well, this is the thing where you also have people like, just say, for example, God, what's his name? This always happens to me where when I think of somebody, and this happens seemingly a lot. I guess I haven't had enough coffee yet this morning. Shapiro. Where Shapiro will oftentimes will say, "Hey, I'll pay X amount of money for so and so to come on and talk to me." I think Mark Levin does the same thing. I think he has an outstanding thing of $100,000 to it was somebody in the DNC to debate him. And he's like, I got the cash here. Let's do this, and nobody takes these people up on their offers.
Well, Ben Shapiro even goes so far as when he does university talks, he says, "If you disagree with me, you get to the front of the line." In the question and answer session with the students. Of course, some of the students do take him up on that, but that's how much these guys are inviting debate, and they want it. But none of the prominent figures on the left are willing to do that.
No. Well, thank God at least the university students have enough, courage to do it.
That being said, I do gotta give Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks credit for he has debated Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro. So got to give him credit for that, even though I think the guy he's just completely a left-wing mouthpiece. But hey, he was willing to get up there and do it.
Actually, I haven't seen that. How did that work out?
I didn't watch the whole thing. Now I do know he made a public statement that he liked debating Dave Rubin better than Ben Shapiro. Or no, it wasn't Dave Rubin. I'm sorry, I misspoke there. It was Tucker Carlson.
Okay.
Because Tucker Carlson actually agrees with him on a lot of issues. Tucker Carlson's kind of a little bit of a populist, believes that corporations need to be reined in a bit. So they agreed with a little bit more, and he said that Ben Shapiro was like a robot. Whereas Ben Shapiro's more of a classic conservative that's, doesn't believe that he thinks big corporations are fine, what they're doing is fine, and less regulation is better. But I watched a little bit of the Tucker Carlson one, and I mean, it was fine, So good for him.
No, that's good.
I think the reason I said Dave Rubin is because he used to be on the Young Turks.
Yeah, there's that. Well, Jason, you want to talk about anything else before we close it out for the night?
Nope, nothing else on my mind. Like we were discussing, honestly, been a couple of slow news weeks. And I think you're right. I think next week, maybe if we have another slow news week, we just kind of go off the rails and talk about something completely different.
Yeah, that's probably not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Kind of get out of politics for a little bit anyway. I think we're starting to get a little burnt out on it.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, and we know that our conspiracy show was a lot of fun for us, so we could do something else in the same vein.
Yeah, and again, guys, if there's something you want us to talk about, that would we are kind of probing you guys for some suggestions here. So feel free to reach out to us and tell us what you want us to talk about, because sometimes we'll get burnt out talking about politics when we talk about it a lot, or we'll otherwise, we're going to just have to try to guess, and like I said, we might will go off the rails on some sort of crazy conspiracy thing, and like we have no idea exactly what you want to hear and see from us unless you tell us. So this is in your guys' hands too. So
anything and everything,
pretty much. And again, if you like what you're seeing, make sure to press like and subscribe right down there, and be sure to share it with your friends. Those that are open-minded to a fun little conversation. Anyway, as always, thanks for joining us, and you have yourselves a good night.
Good night.